Welcome back everybody to Moderate Mods, and today we're looking at the 1968 Abarth 595 SS. So yeah, this is easily the slowest car that we've had on this series so far. Not the worst though, as I'm really rather a fan of these classic super minis that we've seen on Forza games in the last few. Also had that Subaru, which was even slower than this, but also even smaller. And yeah, obviously we've also had the Peel cars and stuff. So yeah, this is easily one of my favourite of the super minis. So yeah, let's get around the circuit and see what it can do in its stock form. We'll also take a quick look at its horsepower readings and everything else before we get out there onto the track. So yeah, it's not the quickest of cars, especially up a hill, but like I said, it's far from the worst. It's far from my least favourite of the cars that we've had on this series so far. So yeah, as you can see, not massively quick in terms of speed or acceleration. Handling and braking is fairly good, but then again, it's not being challenged by any insane amounts of levels of power or torque. And launch is decent because, yeah, it's only got 28 horsepower and 34 pounds-feet of torque from a 594cc two-cylinder engine. So yeah, it's not even got 4 cylinders, but it does only weigh 1,257 pounds. So we're probably not going to need to lighten this car all that much, but we're definitely going to have to give it some more power. But nonetheless, let's see what we can do in the stock form first. No doubt we're going to be quite slow lap time wise. We're certainly not going to get close to our quickest lap time. Probably not even when it's upgraded, but yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting to see the larger gap between this and the upgraded version that we eventually get to. So yeah, at least the engine does rev up to 6,000 RPM, and it is a 4-speed, so you can at least make the most of that horsepower. But yeah, hills like this really do kill the car's acceleration. But it's far from the worst car on the game in terms of speed and acceleration, weirdly enough. The Peel cars, for instance, are far worse than this. But once it gets going, it manages to hold that speed fairly well. And because it's such a small and lightweight car, it's got really good turning. It's got really good handling in general because of how little horsepower it's got. Again, that is going to have to change once we upgrade this, because obviously we're going to give it more power. So the suspension is going to have to be a little stiffer, those tyres are going to have to be wider. And the brakes will have to be better as well. But yeah, I love this car. I really do like these super minis. I wish there were more on these games of this type. Because, yeah, either modern versions or classic versions, because yeah, Japan excelled at the K cars, which are vehicles made to a specific regulation in terms of size, not just in terms of the vehicle itself, but obviously in terms of the engines. And yeah, there are so many interesting cars from that period of K cars in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s that Japan or other Asian countries had made that I would love to see. First lap time 1 minute 48.909, so still below 2 minutes, which is surprising given that we had got above 60 miles an hour, but yeah, we'll definitely improve upon it on this second lap. It's going to be interesting to see by how much. Now this was the most powerful version of this car, which is obviously based on the Fiat 500. And it's easily the more sporty version as well, with those twin exhausts being part of that. Yeah, like all of the other Fiat 500s, it has its roof is mostly fabric, purely to keep weight down, and because materials at that time were still quite expensive after World War II and all that lot. One thing I hope we see in future Forza games though is more interactivity with what our car can do. Because obviously we can still drive it and we can do all of that stuff, and we can obviously upgrade the cars, but it's very rare that you see in any game really that you can interact with what the car can do, because obviously you can retract the roof on this car, but obviously you can't do that in the game. And it'd also be nice to be the person to actually initiate, say, wipers starting or anything like that when it gets rainy, or put lights on, because surprisingly lights weren't automatic back in the day of this car. It'd be interesting to see classic cars being able to do that physically yourself. But yeah, there we go, 1 minute 37.798, so yeah, more than 10 seconds quicker than before. So yeah, this car's nowhere near as slow as people make it out to be. Obviously it's not the quickest in terms of acceleration, but once you get that speed up, it's very difficult to actually lose it. Purely because it's reasonably good in terms of its handling, certainly enough to deal with the power it's got. And therefore it's hard to get anything really wrong in terms of cornering. It sure does love going down hills, because as you can see we massively increase in speed because of them. It's just it doesn't like going up the hills. There is some understeer, especially if you're not paying attention. As you can see, easily able to get up towards the motorway speed in the UK in this car, which is the bare minimum to us, to be honest. But there we go, we've actually improved on our third lap for once. Yeah, 1 minute 36.63 seconds is our final time there in our little Fiat 595. So yeah, let's nonetheless get to the garage and see what upgrades we can give this little Supermini. So here is the car. It's obviously a really rather small and lightweight vehicle. There really is not very much to the car in its terms of its interior, though it does have a nice small chunky steering wheel to go with the sporty aspects of the car. So yeah, it is obviously a rather simple car. I'd like to try and keep it that way, but we'll have to see what kind of upgrades we can actually give it. First, let's have a look at the stats in terms of its acceleration. So yeah, not 16, 28.250 seconds. Doesn't manage to get to 200, and it has a top speed of 74 miles an hour, which isn't awful for a car with so few horsepower, but obviously you could do better today. Now let's see what engines we can swap into this car. So we can swap in a 1.4 litre inline-4 turbo with 158 horsepower and 169 pounds-feet of torque. It does add weight up a little bit, but obviously it's a massive increase in displacement and horsepower and torque. Though not up by all that much, it's just a little over twice as large, and obviously has twice the cylinders, but yeah, that's not a massively big engine, so that could possibly fit the car. An inline-4 motorbike engine also could fit in the car, and actually reduces the weight. Doesn't give us as much torque as the turbo engine, but does give us more horsepower, and actually reduces the weight overall, and improves the weight ratio as it goes up to 45%. But bike engines I'm really not a fan of in terms of how they sound, to be honest. And we can put a 1.6 litre inline-4 turbo rally engine, but that is far too much horsepower for me, to be honest. I think we'll go for the 1.4 litre inline-4 turbo. I'm pretty sure it's the Abarth 500 modern version engine. It's a little bit less in terms of horsepower than that car, but has the same torque and is the same displacement, so yeah, I think we'll go for that. Pretty sure you could fit that in this car, if I'm honest. Don't think we're really going to have to improve any extra in terms of horsepower, to be honest, but because I like it to be even in terms of horsepower, we'll give it a sporty intake just to give it that little bit of an extra boost over the original engine. We'll lighten the flywheel up to be a sporty flywheel just to make it a little bit lighter, because obviously this car has increased in some weight due to that bigger engine. We'll give it the sport brakes. give it the street suspension, as well as street front and rear anti-roll bars, because obviously this is quite a soft car in terms of its suspension. Don't need to lighten it up in terms of removing parts of the car, but we will give it a street clutch, a street transmission, and we'll give it a racing driving line to again knock some more weight out of the car. Because yeah, the weight has obviously gone up not just from the engine, but it's also going to go up from having some wider tyres, just to improve the handling overall, as well as help in the acceleration. And we'll give it a street tread as well, which is going to help massively in terms of the overall performance of the vehicle. And yeah, that's all we really need to do. I know taking an engine out and putting a new one in is a sizable job, but at the end of the day, it's not the hardest thing to do when you're dealing with a car that really has very little technology in the way to deal with. So yeah, there we go. So yeah, acceleration wise, 0 to 60 now in 6.154 seconds, so we've reduced the acceleration time by I think well over 20 seconds, and we can now achieve 100 mile an hour in 11.250 seconds, and we've now got a top speed of 137 miles an hour. Not ridiculously quick in terms of top speed, but it's nearly twice what it could do originally, so yeah, that is still really rather good and more than enough for this car. So yeah, let's get out onto the track again and see what this vehicle can do. So now the car is in B class, shooting up all the way from bottom of the D class criteria. So yeah, that is a massive increase in PI, but is this going to be a massive increase in time? But yeah, let's see how quick this car is now. I don't think it's too radically different to what the car was in its stock form. We still only rev up to 6,000 RPM, just like the standard car. It's just now that we've got way more horsepower and torque. We do weigh a little bit more. As you can see, the car is a little stiffer, but I've kept it only on street suspension, street anti-roll bars, purely because you wouldn't want a small car like this to be really rather stiff and rigid, because you'd be bouncing all over the place. You want to keep it a little bit soft, and at the end of the day it just looks more comical and is a bit more fun, to be honest. Italian cars are generally about being fun and having a good time, so yeah, keeping it on street suspension is all about that, really. It's hardly hindering our performance. We've got a little bit of a drifter as well, despite the wider tread. Well, better tread and the wider tyre, should I say. And we're easily able to deal with the hill now. Getting well past 100 mile an hour. And there we go. Time of 1 minute 13.974. So that's more than 20 seconds quicker than the stock car in its fastest lap. This is really fun. It's probably the most fun we've had in a car yet on this series. And to be honest, we've not really done all that much to it. I know obviously we've swapped an entire engine out, but outside of that there's only been minor modifications, and we didn't have to do a lot to the engine either just to make it that little better. Unlike other engines that we've had to swap in, the MG for instance, which we swapped a V8 in, and we did I think we did more modifications to that than just this than we did to this, but either way, this is a cracking little car now. Probably be reasonably competitive as well if you're into that. Also sounds fairly good as well. And there we go, another increase in time, 1 minute, or decrease in time, 1 minute 8 seconds, .802. Those brakes are also helping massively, because obviously we got one far faster than we would ever in the car in stock form, so TWASA brakes to stop this car from any more than 74 miles an hour would be asking a lot. And obviously we're doing far more than 74 miles an hour, we're getting up to well over 100. Even with the steepest of hills in the in Italy, in this car in stock form would never get you up to 100 mile an hour, so been reasonable to ask the original brakes to deal with this car's increase in speed. We're going to get a better time this time? Yes, we are. Well, that's the first car I think on this series that we've had that has increased every lap, not just in its stock form but also in its modified form. And yeah, it's a great little car. It's probably the most drastic change from the stock version that we've done on this series so far, because obviously 28 horsepower to 165 is a massive leap, unlike say the MG that went only about 100 extra horsepower, and other vehicles that have only gone up so like 50 or so. So yeah, big change, but it's still like the classic car. It's still lightweight, it's still nimble, it's still a riot to drive. It just so happens to be faster while doing that kind of driving style of hurling it into corners and watching the car lean over. So yeah, really fun car, and yeah, these Superminis, as far as I'm concerned, are really rather underrated. And quite frankly, we need more of them, because I would love to see, like I said earlier, more small Superminis, especially more modern ones. But nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.